Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the summer-ready riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Well, the spring session of Parliament is drawing to an end. This might be the last session of Parliament before fall election. So I thought we'd take a little stroll down memory lane. But first, a look ahead at what is to come. The pandemic has nearly passed, thanks largely to the miracle of capitalism. In countries which had access to vaccines developed by democratic, free market nations, case numbers crash as vaccine rates soar. Unsurprisingly, China's vaccines are less effective and are failing to slow the spread in countries which opted for the communist solution. This miracle of capitalism presents a real problem for the radical liberals and other left-wing extremists. When the pandemic first hit, many of these radicals were very excited about the crisis. Almost immediately, they began to call it an opportunity. When our own Prime Minister called the pandemic an opportunity to reset our economy, he was only parroting talking points hammered out by the socialists from the World Economic Forum. If you recall, it was March 17, 2020, when Ontario and much of the Western world went into our first lockdown. The very next day, a left-wing professor of economics wrote an article for the Guardian newspaper, writing about the pandemic, quote, "But we can use this moment to bring a stakeholder approach to the center of capitalism. Let's not let this crisis go to waste," end quote. Now, when radicals say they want to bring a stakeholder approach to the center of capitalism, what they really mean is they want to drive a stake through the heart of capitalism. It is radicals who see any crisis as an opportunity to push their socialist agenda. And now that the pandemic is passing, they're rebranding climate change as a climate emergency in order to justify climate lockdowns. Here's what that same left-wing professor of economics was writing last fall, quote, "In the near future, the world may need to resort to lockdowns again, this time to tackle a climate emergency. Under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use, ban consumption of red meat, and impose extreme energy-saving measures, while fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. To avoid such a scenario, we must overhaul our economic structures and do capitalism differently," end of quote. Well, the professor's like a broken record. After the 2009 financial crisis, she wrote a book calling for capitalism to be restructured. As soon as the pandemic broke out, she was calling for capitalism to be restructured. Now, with the pandemic receding, she's citing climate change as a reason capitalism needs to be restructured. If a massive asteroid was headed for Earth, I'm pretty sure the radical left solution will be to restructure capitalism after forcing us to lock down, of course. As the professor openly admits, any crisis or any issue which can be rebranded a crisis will be used as a pretext to advance authoritarian socialism. That is the agenda that Trudeau openly admires. How long do you think it'll take before the Trudeau Liberals start calling for a climate lockdown? Let me know what you think in the comments below. This week I delivered a speech in the House of Commons at 1 in the morning. The reason we're debating past midnight this week is because of Liberal incompetence. The Liberals have failed to work with other parties in a minority government. They've obstructed the work of committees to protect the Prime Minister from investigations. The problem for the Liberals is that in order to obstruct investigating into their corruption, they have to obstruct their own legislation. Right now, at Defense Committee, the Liberals have been obstructing a vote on their own motion. The only thing that ever matters to this government is protecting the Prime Minister's brand. Having put style over substance for 6 years, they're now trying to force through 4 bills before the summer. The 4 bills the Liberals are trying to ram through are the Budget Bill, the Censorship Act, the Conversion Therapy Ban, and the Climate Change Accountability Act. Let's look at the Censorship Act as an example of Liberal incompetence. Bill C-10, also known as Trudeau's Internet Censorship Act, is bad. It's an attack on the freedom of expression and a massive gift to old media. But the bill is popular with the cultural elites in Quebec, so the Liberals in the Bloc teamed up in committee to cut off debate. That's when things went completely off the rails. The Liberals had cut off debate at committee before the Liberals had finished introducing their own amendments. The Liberals tried to ignore their own order and introduce the amendments anyhow. The chair of the committee, a Liberal with a conscience, ruled those amendments out of order. The rest of the Liberals on the committee were having none of that. They voted with the Bloc and NDP to overrule the Liberal chair. Once the chair was overruled, the committee began to add secret amendment one after another. Canadians were not provided with the text of the amendments, but old media lobbyists on Twitter sure seemed to know what was in those secret amendments. University of Ottawa professor Michael Geist called this secret lawmaking an assault on democracy. Passing secret amendments like this has never happened before in Canadian history. It's wrong, it's undemocratic, and it's un-Canadian. That's why we raised the issue in the House of Commons, and the Speaker of the House, another Liberal with a conscience, ruled that all the Liberals' secret amendments were out of order. Now the Liberals need to reintroduce those amendments in the full House of Commons, but the Liberals set a strict time limit on how much time could be taken up for further debate. In 20 years, I have never seen a bigger example of incompetent lawmaking. It's notable the 2 Liberals who stood up for parliamentary democracy, Scott Sims and Anthony Rota, were both elected before Trudeau became the leader. Sadly, these types of Liberals with a conscience are few and far between. And Trudeau is counting on Liberal-minded Canadians not looking too closely at his agenda. If they did, they might realize Trudeau's a con man, and climate change may be his biggest grift. The fact Trudeau Liberals are so incompetent at government helps tell us what they really care about. Right now, there are bills to update the Privacy Act, change criminal sentences with a focus on helping Indigenous and minority Canadians, and a bill to harass lawful firearms owners. But instead of passing those bills, the Liberals are pushing bills like C-10, which reward special interest groups, and bills like C-12, which do nothing. C-12, it's called the Climate Change Accountability Act. Nothing in C-12 would reduce carbon emissions. It's not about climate change. It creates another layer of bureaucracy and will cost you more. That's all it does. It's not about helping the environment. It is about sounding like they're helping the environment without having to actually do anything to risk winning a majority government. It's virtue signaling all the time. Shouldn't be surprising considering we have a prime minister who's only known in the world for the socks he wears. Nobody ever accused Prime Minister Stephen Harper of being stylish, but he was taken seriously on the world stage, which meant Canada was taken seriously, which meant our issues were taken seriously. Can even liberals say the same thing about Trudeau? Let me know in the comments below. Well, that's all the time we have today. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.